London, 1889. A woman gives birth in a slum so desperate that survival itself is an accomplishment. The child who enters the world that night will become the most famous entertainer on earth, create an art form that didn't exist before him, and die a billionaire exile haunted by the poverty he could never truly escape. His name was Charlie Chaplin, and the distance between where he started and where he ended is almost impossible to believe. The room where Charles Spencer Chaplin was born smelled of cabbage and damp rot. East Lane in Walworth was one of London's bleakest addresses, a street where families lived 6 to a room and children died from diseases that had names no one could pronounce. His mother Hannah was a music hall performer whose voice was failing. His father, Charles Sr., was also a performer, a moderately successful singer who was already drinking himself toward an early grave. The marriage was broken before Charlie arrived. His father had left, occasionally sending money, more often sending nothing. Hannah was trying to support 2 sons on her own. Charlie's older half-brother, Sidney, was 4 years old and already understood that hunger was a permanent condition. Music halls were the entertainment of the working class, rowdy theatres where performers sang, danced, and told jokes to audiences who threw things when displeased. Hannah had been good once. People remembered her voice, her timing, her ability to hold a crowd, but something was going wrong with her vocal cords. The notes wouldn't come. The performances grew shakier. One night in 1894, when Charlie was 5 years old, Hannah walked onto a stage at the canteen in Aldershot. The soldiers in the audience had been drinking. They wanted their money's worth. Hannah began to sing, but her voice cracked, failed, died in her throat. The crowd turned ugly. Catcalls, laughter. Someone threw a coin. Backstage, the theatre manager was desperate. He grabbed the small boy standing in the wings, Hannah's son Charlie, and shoved him onto the stage. The child had been watching his mother's act for years. He knew the songs. He walked to the centre of the platform, looked out at the sea of hostile faces, and began to sing. His voice was clear and strong. The soldiers quieted. Then Charlie did something extraordinary. He stopped singing, walked to the edge of the stage, and began collecting the coins they were throwing. He examined each one, commenting on its value, making the audience laugh. At 5 years old, with no training, he was improvising comedy. The soldiers roared with approval. They threw more coins. Charlie gathered them, his small hands filling with copper. He looked back at his mother standing in the wings, her career ending, and continued performing. It was the first time he'd been on stage. It was also the night that would define everything that followed. Hannah never performed again. Her voice was gone, but worse than that, her mind was beginning to go as well. The strain of poverty, the humiliation of failure, the terror of not being able to feed her children, all of it was fracturing something inside her. She would spend much of the rest of her life in and out of asylums, lost to a mental illness that had no name and no cure in Victorian England. Charlie and Sidney were sent to the Hanwell School for orphans and destitute children. It wasn't technically an orphanage since their mother was alive, but functionally it was the same. The institution was enormous, housing over 1,000 children in barrack-style dormitories. The food was minimal. The discipline was harsh. Children who misbehaved were beaten. Children who couldn't keep up were simply left behind. Charlie was 7 years old. He would later describe Hanwell as the place where his childhood ended. There was no affection here, no kindness, just the grinding routine of institutional survival. Wake at 6, cold water wash, thin porridge, manual labour, more porridge, sleep, repeat. Sidney, being older, took it harder. He plotted escape, whispered plans to his younger brother in the dark dormitory. But there was nowhere to escape to. Their mother was in the asylum. Their father was drunk in a rented room somewhere, unreachable. After 18 months, Hannah was released from the asylum, declared sane enough to reclaim her children. The family reunited in a single room in Pownall Terrace. Hannah tried to work, taking in sewing, doing whatever piecework she could find, but the money was never enough. They moved from room to room, always one step ahead of eviction, always hungry. Charlie learned to steal food. Not dramatically, not robbery, just the small desperate thefts of a starving child. A piece of fruit from a cart, bread from a bakery counter. Once he stole a piece of bacon from a butcher's window and ran through the streets clutching it, convinced he'd be arrested, imprisoned, hanged. The streets themselves became his education. He watched everything. The way people walked, the gestures they made, the way emotion showed in posture and movement. He studied the drunks stumbling from pubs, the ladies picking their way through mud in expensive dresses, the policemen swinging their truncheons. Every human type, every mannerism, every detail went into his memory. In 1896, when Charlie was 7, his father died. Charles Chaplin Sr. was 37 years old. His liver had given out, destroyed by years of drinking. He left nothing, no money, no possessions of value, nothing that could help his abandoned family. Just a death certificate and a pauper's grave. Hannah's mental state deteriorated further. She began seeing visions, hearing voices, talking to people who weren't there. Charlie would come home to find her in conversations with invisible presences or staring at the wall for hours. The authorities took her back to the asylum. This time she wouldn't return for years. Charlie and Sydney were separated. Sydney was sent to a training ship for destitute boys, a program designed to turn slum children into merchant sailors. Charlie was sent back to Hanwell, then transferred to another institution, then another. He was a ward of the state, a problem to be processed through the system. But something in Charlie refused to break. While other children succumbed to despair or institutional numbness, he kept watching, kept learning, kept storing away observations. The way a particular teacher walked with a limp, the way the headmaster's face turned red when he was angry, the way grief looked different from exhaustion. At 9 years old, he was performing again. Not officially, not on stages, but in the institutions and workhouses where he was held. He would mimic the authorities, entertain the other children, create brief moments of laughter in places designed to crush joy. It was survival and something more. It was the beginning of understanding that performance was power. Sydney escaped his training ship and tracked down his younger brother. The two boys, now teenagers, decided they would make their own way. No more institutions. No more waiting for adults to save them. They would enter the music halls, the same world that had destroyed their mother, and they would conquer it. Sydney got work as a bartender, then as a performer's assistant. Charlie took any job he could find, sold flowers on street corners, worked as a doctor's boy, anything that paid. But he was watching the music halls obsessively now, studying the acts, learning what worked and what didn't. In 1898, at age 9, Charlie got his first real performing job with a clog dancing troupe called the 8 Lancashire Lads. Clog dancing was a working-class entertainment, performers in wooden shoes creating rhythms and patterns. Charlie learned the dances, but more importantly, he learned how to hold an audience's attention, how to make a gesture bigger so the back rows could see it, how to time a movement for maximum effect. The troupe toured, and Charlie saw England beyond London for the first time. Provincial towns, industrial cities, seaside resorts, everywhere the same music halls, the same rowdy crowds, the same desperate performers trying to avoid being pelted with garbage. He grew older, moved between jobs, always performing when he could. He played Billy the Page Boy in Sherlock Holmes, a small part in a touring production. He learned to act, to create a character, to sustain a performance across an evening. The stage wasn't just a place to earn money anymore. It was home, the only place he felt fully alive. Sydney, meanwhile, had gotten work with a prestigious comedy troupe run by Fred Carno. Carno's companies were known for physical comedy, pantomime sketches with minimal dialogue. They were popular, profitable, and Carno was always looking for talent. In 1908, when Charlie was 19, Sydney got him an audition. Charlie performed a drunk routine he'd been developing, a character staggering and fumbling, trying to maintain dignity while losing control of his own body. It was funny and sad at the same time, drawing on every drunk he'd ever watched in the London slums. Carno hired him immediately. Fred Carno's comedy companies were the training ground for some of the greatest performers of the era. The sketches were entirely physical, silent except for occasional sound effects. Performers had to communicate everything through gesture, expression, and movement. For Charlie, who had been observing human behaviour obsessively since childhood, it was perfect. He started in small roles, but his talent was obvious. Within months, he was playing lead parts. Within a year, he was the star of Carno's most popular sketch, A Night in an English Music Hall, playing a drunk who disrupts a theatre performance. The character was chaotic and refined simultaneously, a gentleman reduced to absurdity, but never losing a core of dignity. The routine would tour America. That fact alone seemed impossible to the boy from Pownall Terrace, but it was happening. In 1910, Charlie Chaplin boarded a ship bound for New York, leaving England for the first time, carrying nothing but a small trunk of belongings and a repertoire of characters developed in slums and institutions and cheap music halls. America was overwhelming. New York was bigger, faster, louder than anything London had prepared him for. The buildings scraped the sky. The streets teemed with immigrants from every nation. The theatres were palaces compared to the shabby halls he knew. The Carno troupe toured across America, playing to packed houses. American audiences loved the physical comedy, the pantomime, the precisely choreographed chaos. And they loved Charlie. His drunk character became legendary, imitated by other performers, discussed in newspapers. Between tours, Charlie explored American cities, absorbing everything. The pace of life here was different. People moved faster, talked faster, seemed to believe that anything was possible. The optimism was intoxicating to someone who had grown up expecting nothing. In 1912, during the Second American Tour, something happened that would change everything. A man named Adam Kessel was in the audience at a Philadelphia theatre. Kessel was a film producer, working for a new company called Keystone that made short comedy movies. He watched Charlie perform and saw something. Not just a stage comedian, but someone whose physicality would translate to the new medium of motion pictures. Kessel approached Charlie after the show. He offered him a job in California, making movies for Keystone. The money was extraordinary, $150 a week, more than Charlie had ever imagined earning. The catch was that he'd have to leave the Carno troupe, leave the security of stage work, and gamble on this new technology that most people still considered a novelty. Charlie hesitated. Motion pictures were uncertain. Most performers looked down on them, considered them crude entertainment for immigrants who couldn't understand English dialogue. But the money was real, and something in Charlie recognized that this new medium might be important. In November 1913, Charlie Chaplin took a train west across America toward a place called Hollywood. He'd never heard of it before Keystone made the offer. Most people hadn't. It was just a suburb of Los Angeles where a few movie companies had set up shop because the weather was good and land was cheap. The train journey took days. Charlie watched the country pass outside his window, farms giving way to desert, mountains rising and falling. He was 24 years old, leaving behind everything he knew for a technology he didn't understand. When he arrived in Los Angeles, the sunshine was disorienting. London had been grey. New York had been grey. California was relentlessly bright, the light hard and clear in a way that hurt his eyes. Palm trees lined the streets. The air smelled of oranges and dust. Keystone Studios was not impressive. It was a collection of wooden buildings on a dirt lot, open stages where actors performed under the sun, because electric lights weren't powerful enough yet. The whole operation felt temporary, improvised, like it might blow away in the next strong wind. The director was Max Sennett, a man who understood slapstick the way a butcher understands meat. His films were simple. People ran, fell, fought, and chased each other. Cops crashed into things. Pretty girls got their skirts caught on fences. Pies flew through the air. It was crude and effective, and audiences loved it. Sennett looked at Charlie and saw a stage comedian who might work on film. Nothing more. He put him in front of a camera and told him to do something funny. Charlie froze. The camera was different from an audience. It didn't react. It just watched, mechanical and indifferent. On stage, you could feel the crowd. Adjust your timing based on their laughter. The camera gave nothing back. His first film was called Making a Living, and it was terrible. Charlie played a villain with a top hat and a mustache, running around causing trouble. It was someone else's character, performed the way someone else thought it should be performed. The result was generic, forgettable. When Sennett saw the footage, he was unimpressed. This English stage actor might not work out after all. But Charlie knew something was wrong. He'd been performing since he was 5 years old. He understood comedy in his bones. The problem wasn't him. The problem was that he was trying to be someone else. For his second film, Charlie asked if he could develop his own character. Sennett agreed, probably because he had nothing to lose. If this English kid failed again, they'd just let him go. Charlie walked onto the wardrobe lot and started pulling clothes off racks at random. He grabbed a pair of baggy pants that belonged to a much larger man. He found a tight jacket that barely fit. He picked up a small derby hat, a bamboo cane, and a pair of oversized shoes that he put on the wrong feet. He stood in front of a mirror and looked at what he'd created. The costume was contradictory. The tight jacket suggested poverty, but worn with a certain dignity. The cane suggested elegance, but held by someone who clearly had no business pretending to be elegant. The moustache he'd added was tiny, almost apologetic, a small gesture toward respectability from someone who had none. The character was a tramp, but not a sad tramp. There was something jaunty about him, something defiant. He was poor but not defeated, ridiculous but not pathetic. He walked with a strange waddle, feet splayed outward, cane twirling, shoulders rolling. It was funny but also oddly graceful. What Charlie had invented standing in that wardrobe room in 1914 was something deeper than a costume. He'd created a character who embodied every contradiction of modern life. The tramp wanted dignity in a world that wouldn't give it to him. He aspired to refinement while living in squalor. He maintained elaborate manners while stealing food to survive. He fell in love with beautiful women who were completely out of his reach. The character was Charlie's childhood, made universal. Every humiliation, every disappointment, every desperate attempt to maintain self-respect in circumstances that destroyed it, but filtered through comedy, made bearable through laughter. The tramp appeared for the first time in a film called Kid Auto Races at Venice. It was a simple concept. Charlie's character keeps interrupting a newsreel cameraman who's trying to film a children's race. That's it. 11 minutes of a strange little man with a funny walk getting in the way of the camera. Audiences went insane for it. They'd never seen anything like this character. Slapstick comedians usually played one note, stupid or mean or clumsy. The tramp was complex. You laughed at him but also rooted for him. He got knocked down and got back up with his dignity somehow intact. Within weeks, Charlie was directing his own films. Sennett recognized that this English kid understood something about the camera that the other comedians didn't. Charlie knew how to frame a shot, how to time a gag for maximum impact, how to build comedy through visual storytelling rather than random chaos. He made dozens of films in 1914 alone, churning them out at Keystone's brutal pace. Each one taught him something new about the medium: how to use depth, how to pace a scene, how to make the audience care about a character in just a few minutes. But Keystone was frustrating. Sennett wanted fast, cheap, simple. Charlie wanted to slow down, build characters, tell stories that meant something. The tension grew until it became unbearable. In 1915, Charlie left Keystone for S&A Studios, who offered him more money and more control. Then in 1916, he moved to Mutual, who offered even more. Each move gave him greater freedom to develop his craft. The films grew more sophisticated. The Immigrant showed the tramp arriving in America, experiencing the chaos and hope of Ellis Island. Easy Street put him in the role of a policeman trying to reform a violent slum. The Pawn Shop was almost a ballet, full of graceful movements and perfectly timed physical comedy. Charlie was becoming obsessed with perfection. He would shoot the same scene 30, 40, 50 times, adjusting tiny details until it felt right. Other directors thought he was crazy. Film was expensive. Time was money. Why waste resources on subtleties that audiences wouldn't notice? But audiences did notice. They might not have been able to articulate why Charlie's films felt different, but they could feel it. The timing was better. The emotions were realer. The comedy came from character rather than just chaos. By 1918, Charlie was the most famous person in the world. Not the most famous actor, the most famous person. His face was recognized on every continent. Children in London, Paris, Tokyo, and Buenos Aires imitated his walk. The Tramp was a universal language. The money was staggering. Charlie negotiated a contract with First National that guaranteed him over $1 million. $1 million for someone who'd been starving in London workhouses 15 years earlier. The numbers were so large they stopped feeling real. He moved into a mansion in Beverly Hills. He bought cars, threw parties, dated beautiful actresses. He'd made it out completely, transformed himself from a workhouse kid into Hollywood royalty. But something was nagging at him. The Tramp character was becoming a trap. Audiences wanted the same thing over and over. Studios wanted safe, proven formulas. Charlie was starting to feel like he'd invented a character so successful that it was swallowing him whole. In 1919, Charlie did something radical. He joined with 3 other major stars, Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and D.W. Griffith, to form United Artists. It was a distribution company owned by the artists themselves rather than by studios. The Hollywood establishment was horrified. The inmates were running the asylum. How dare performers think they could control their own work? But United Artists survived, and it gave Charlie total creative freedom. He could make whatever films he wanted, take as long as he needed, and keep most of the profits. The first film he made for United Artists was The Kid, released in 1921. It was his longest film yet, over an hour, which was considered risky. Short comedies were safe. Feature-length films were for serious drama. But The Kid wasn't just comedy. It told the story of the tramp finding an abandoned baby and raising him in poverty. The film was funny, but also heartbreaking, drawing directly on Charlie's own childhood. The scenes of poverty were authentic because he'd lived them. The emotion was real because he'd felt it. The film was a massive success, proving that audiences would accept the tramp in longer, more complex stories. Charlie had transformed himself again, from comedian to filmmaker, from performer to artist. Through the 1920s, he refined his craft further. The Gold Rush in 1925 became one of the most famous films of the silent era. The image of the tramp eating a boiled shoe in a cabin during a snowstorm entered popular culture permanently. The Dance of the Dinner Rolls, where Charlie stuck forks in 2 bread rolls and made them dance like legs, became one of the most imitated scenes in cinema history. The Circus in 1928 showed the tramp accidentally becoming a circus performer. City Lights in 1931 told the story of his love for a blind flower girl. Each film pushed further, took more risks, trusted audiences to follow him into deeper emotional territory. But the world was changing. In 1927, the jazz singer introduced a synchronized sound to cinema. Suddenly movies could talk. The silent era was ending, and with it, the art form that Charlie had mastered. Other silent comedians struggled to adapt. Some had voices that didn't match their screen personas. Others couldn't adjust their timing to accommodate dialogue. Many careers ended overnight, Charlie resisted sound. He believed correctly that the Tramp's power came from his universality. The character transcended language because he never spoke. The moment he opened his mouth, he'd become specific, limited, less universal. City Lights was released in 1931, 4 years after sound arrived, and Charlie made it silent anyway. Studios thought he was committing career suicide. The public had moved on. They wanted talkies. The film was a triumph. Audiences didn't care that it was silent. They cared that it was beautiful, funny, and emotionally devastating. The final scene, where the blind girl who can now see touches the Tramp's face and realizes who he is, remains one of the most powerful moments in cinema history. Charlie had proven he could survive the transition to sound by refusing to participate in it, but he couldn't hold back technology forever. His next film would have to reckon with a changing world in ways that went far beyond sound. Because while Charlie had been perfecting his art, the world outside the studios was collapsing. The Great Depression had destroyed millions of lives. Unemployment was massive. Poverty was everywhere. And in Europe, darker forces were rising. Fascism was spreading. War was coming. The Tramp, that character of simple poverty and simple dreams, suddenly seemed inadequate to the moment. Charlie was going to have to decide what his art meant in a world that was tearing itself apart. In 1936, Charlie Chaplin made a decision that would define the rest of his career. He would make a film about modern industrial society, about machines and poverty and the dehumanization of workers. He would call it Modern Times, and it would be the last pure appearance of the Tramp. The film opens with one of the most famous images Chaplin ever created. Workers pour into a factory like sheep being herded. Inside, the Tramp works on an assembly line, tightening bolts as they pass. The pace accelerates. He can't keep up. The machine swallows him, pulls him through its gears. It's a nightmare vision of industrial capitalism, of human beings reduced to cogs in machinery they don't control. The film had sound effects and music, but the Tramp still didn't speak in conventional dialogue. Charlie had found a compromise. The film existed in a strange space between silent and sound cinema, using the tools of both without fully committing to either. But what made Modern Times genuinely radical wasn't its technical approach, it was its politics. The film showed workers striking, showed police brutality, showed the Tramp accidentally leading a communist demonstration after picking up a red flag that had fallen off a truck. In Depression-era America, with labor organizing and class conflict dominating headlines, this wasn't subtle allegory. Charlie was taking sides. The film was banned in Germany and Italy, where fascist governments saw it as communist propaganda. In America, conservative groups protested. The FBI opened a file on Chaplin that would grow to nearly 2,000 pages over the coming decades. Charlie had always been political in his way. The Tramp was inherently a political figure, a symbol of the poor and dispossessed. But Modern Times made that politics explicit, unavoidable, and it made Charlie enemies he'd never fully shake. The film ended with the Tramp and a young woman, both outcasts, walking down a road into an uncertain future. It was an ending without resolution, without the traditional Chaplin miracle that saved the day. The world was darker now. Simple optimism wasn't enough. Charlie knew the Tramp's era was ending. His next film would be different, more ambitious, more dangerous, more necessary. The Great Dictator began filming in 1939, the same year Germany invaded Poland. By the time it was released in October 1940, France had fallen, Britain was being bombed, and America was still pretending it could stay out of the war. The film was a direct attack on Adolf Hitler. Charlie played two roles: a Jewish barber who looks exactly like Adenoid Hinkle, the dictator of Termania. The resemblance between Charlie and Hitler had been noted for years. Both had the small moustache. Both were born within days of each other in 1889. Charlie decided to use that resemblance as a weapon. The film mocked Hitler mercilessly. Hinkle speaks in gibberish that sounds like German but is pure nonsense. He dances with a globe balloon, dreaming of world conquest until the balloon pops. He throws tantrums like a child. The portrayal was devastating precisely because it was funny. Hitler wanted to be feared. Charlie made him ridiculous. But the film went beyond mockery. The Jewish barber is mistaken for Hinkle and forced to give a speech to massive crowds, expecting the dictator. Instead, Charlie delivered a 6-minute monologue directly to the camera, to the audience, to the world. "I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible." The speech abandoned all pretense of comedy. Charlie spoke about human kindness, about the need to fight tyranny, about the choice between hope and despair. It was the most direct political statement any major filmmaker had ever made. The hate of men will pass and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. The final line was directed at soldiers fighting fascism. "Look up! Look up! The clouds are lifting. The sun is breaking through. We are coming out of the darkness into the light." The speech divided audiences then and divides them now. Some found it powerful and necessary. Others thought it was naive, preachy, that Charlie had abandoned art for propaganda. The film made Charlie a target. The FBI's file on him grew thicker. Conservative groups called him a communist sympathizer. Isolationists accused him of trying to drag America into a foreign war. Charlie didn't care. He'd said what needed saying, and the film was a massive commercial success, proving audiences were ready for entertainment that took the war seriously. But Charlie's personal life was about to implode in ways that would make his political controversies seem minor. Charlie Chaplin had always had complicated relationships with women. He'd been married 3 times by 1940, each time to much younger women, each marriage ending badly. His first marriage at 29 was to 16-year-old Mildred Harris. It lasted 2 years. His second at 35 was to 16-year-old Lita Gray. That marriage produced 2 sons and a bitter divorce that became tabloid sensation. His third marriage at 47 was to 21-year-old Paulette Goddard, his co-star in Modern Times. That ended in 1942. Then in 1942, Joan Barry, a 22-year-old aspiring actress Charlie had briefly dated, filed a paternity suit claiming he'd fathered her daughter. Blood tests proved Charlie was not the father. The tests were conclusive, scientific, irrefutable. But California courts at the time didn't accept blood test evidence. The jury found for Barry. Charlie was ordered to pay child support for a child that biology proved wasn't his. The scandal was enormous. The FBI, already investigating Charlie for his politics, piled on. J. Edgar Hoover personally pushed for prosecution under the Mann Act, a law against transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes. Charlie had bought Joan Barry a train ticket from Los Angeles to New York. The fact that this was 2 years before the alleged relationship and that Barry had travelled alone didn't matter. The government wanted Charlie Chaplin destroyed. The trial was a circus. The press covered every detail. Charlie's relationships with young women, his political views, his refusal to become an American citizen despite living in the US for 30 years, everything was used against him. He was acquitted of the Mann Act charges, but the damage was done. America's most famous immigrant, the man whose Tramp had embodied universal humanity, was now seen by many as a moral degenerate and possible communist. During this nightmare, Charlie met Una O'Neill. She was 18, he was 53. She was the daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill. They married in 1943, and shockingly, improbably, it worked. They would stay married until Charlie's death, have 8 children, and by all accounts, be genuinely happy. Una's father disowned her for marrying Chaplin and never spoke to her again. Charlie tried to move forward. In 1947, he released Monsieur Verdoux, a black comedy about a serial killer who murders rich widows. The film was Charlie's attempt to say something about capitalism, about how society creates monsters, about the thin line between business and murder. The character says outright that one murder makes you a villain, but a million murders makes you a hero if you're a general. American audiences hated it. At the premiere, people walked out. Reviews were brutal. The film lost money. Conservative groups organised boycotts. The political and personal scandals had poisoned Charlie's relationship with the American public. The man who'd been the most beloved entertainer in the world was now seen as dangerous, un-American, a bad influence. The FBI file kept growing. HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee, was ramping up its investigations into Hollywood communism. Charlie's name was near the top of their list. He'd never been a Communist Party member, but he'd been sympathetic to leftist causes, had spoken at rallies, had friends who were communists. In the paranoid atmosphere of the late 40s and early 50s, that was enough. In 1952, Charlie left America. He and Una and their children boarded a ship for London. Charlie was going to attend the premiere of his new film, Limelight, a melancholy story about an aging music hall performer. It was a smaller, more personal film than his recent work, perhaps Charlie's way of processing his own decline. 2 days after the ship left New York, the US Attorney General revoked Charlie's re-entry permit. He was informed he'd have to face an inquiry about his political views and moral character before being allowed back into the country. Charlie had lived in America for 42 years. He'd never applied for citizenship, perhaps because he'd always seen himself as English, perhaps because he'd thought it didn't matter. Now it mattered. The most famous immigrant in American history had been exiled. Charlie never returned. He settled in Switzerland with Una and their growing family. He'd released 2 more films, A King in New York in 1957 and A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967, but neither approached his earlier work. The exile had broken something. The creativity that had driven him since childhood, that had survived poverty and loss and scandal, couldn't survive being rejected by the country that had made him. In 1972, 20 years after leaving, Charlie was invited back to America for one night. The Academy Awards wanted to give him an honorary Oscar. He was 82 years old. He'd never won a competitive Oscar, despite revolutionizing cinema. The Academy was trying to make amends. The moment Charlie appeared on stage, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of applause for a frail old man who'd been driven from the country decades earlier. People in the audience were crying. Charlie was crying. It was recognition, apology, farewell, all at once. Charlie accepted the award, said a few words of thanks, and returned to Switzerland. He'd make one more brief appearance on film, a small role in A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967, but the 1972 Oscar ceremony was his real goodbye to the public. He died on Christmas Day, 1977, at his home in Switzerland, surrounded by his large family. He was 88 years old. Newspapers around the world ran obituaries describing him as the first international film star, the man who'd invented screen comedy, the most famous person of the 20th century. But those obituaries couldn't capture what Charlie Chaplin had actually done. He'd taken a new medium, barely a decade old when he started, and shown what it could be. He'd proven that film could be art, that comedy could carry genuine emotion, that a character without words could speak to everyone. The Tramp was more than a character. It was a philosophy, the idea that dignity survives poverty, that kindness matters more than success, that the small person could stand up to the powerful and sometimes, just sometimes, win. In an age of mechanization and mass production, Charlie created something human. In an age of increasing cynicism, he insisted on hope, not naive hope. The Tramp's world was brutal, unfair, often cruel, but hope anyway. Persistence anyway. humanity anyway. Every comedian who came after learned from Charlie. Every filmmaker who wanted to combine comedy and emotion walked a path he'd cleared. The language of film comedy, the techniques that seem natural now, most of them came from a poor English kid who'd learned to perform because it was the only way to survive. But Charlie's legacy is complicated by his personal life, by his relationships with young women, by the gap between his public philosophy of kindness and his private behaviour. The Tramp was generous and gentle. Charlie Chaplin was often neither. Artists aren't their art. The gap between creator and creation can be enormous. Charlie's films showed the world he wished existed. His life showed the world that actually did. We need to talk about something most people don't know. The FBI kept a file on Charlie Chaplin that eventually reached nearly 2,000 pages. For decades, J. Edgar Hoover's agents followed him, monitored his associates, recorded his speeches, and built a case that he was a threat to American security. Why? Because Charlie believed workers deserved better wages, because he'd spoken at rallies during the Depression, because he'd made a film where factory workers weren't happy being treated like machines. The surveillance started in the 1920s, intensified during World War II, and didn't stop until he left the country. They never found evidence he was a communist. They never found evidence he was a spy. What they found was a man who thought capitalism should work for everyone, not just the wealthy. That was enough. The machinery of state power, the same machinery Charlie had satirized in modern times, turned against him. And it worked. They drove him out. But here's what's strange. While the American government was building files on Charlie's politics, millions of Americans were watching his films and finding something that spoke to them directly. The Tramp wasn't making speeches about economic systems. He was just trying to survive in a world that seemed designed to crush people like him. And audiences everywhere recognized that world. They lived in it. The disconnect was complete. The government saw a dangerous radical. The public saw themselves. Charlie had done something that terrified people in power. He'd made poverty and struggle visible without making them pathetic. The Tramp maintained dignity despite having nothing. He refused to accept that his circumstances defined his worth. In films like City Lights and Modern Times, Charlie showed that the problem wasn't the poor. The problem was a system that created poverty while producing abundance. You didn't need to understand economic theory to get that message. You just needed to have worked for low wages, or struggled to pay rent, or felt like the world was indifferent to whether you survived. The Tramp's predicament was your predicament. His small victories felt like your victories. His defeats hurt because they were your defeats. This is what made Charlie's politics so threatening. They weren't abstract. They were embodied in a character everyone loved. When people laughed at the Tramp being chewed up by factory machinery, they were laughing at their own dehumanization. When they cried as he walked away at the end of City Lights, they were crying for their own impossible hopes. Charlie had weaponized empathy. He'd made audiences feel what it was like to be powerless, and then suggested, gently, that maybe things didn't have to be this way. No wonder the FBI kept watching, but the files and the exile and the eventual return for that 12-minute ovation, none of that captures the strangest part of Charlie's legacy. The strangest part is this: Charlie Chaplin created the most famous character of the 20th century, a figure recognized by more people than any religious icon or political leader, and then he killed him. In 1936, Modern Times ended with the Tramp walking down a road with the gamin heading toward an uncertain future. That was the last time audiences saw the character as they knew him. The great dictator in 1940 had a character who looked like the Tramp but wasn't. That character spoke, he gave speeches, he had a name. The actual Tramp, the silent wanderer with the cane and the waddle, was gone. Why? Charlie never fully explained it. Some biographers suggest he felt the character had become limiting, that he wanted to prove he could do more. Others argue that the coming of sound made the Tramp impossible. You couldn't have a silent character in a talking world. But I think something else happened. The Tramp was born from Charlie's childhood poverty and trauma. The character's resilience came from Charlie's real experience of surviving when survival wasn't guaranteed. As Charlie became wealthy and famous, as he built his studio and controlled every aspect of his films, the distance between himself and that character grew. He could still perform the Tramp brilliantly. The movements were ingrained in his body, but he couldn't access the emotional truth anymore. He was a millionaire pretending to be a vagrant. The performance was perfect, but something underneath it had changed. So he let the character go, and in doing so, he made one of the most commercially unwise decisions in entertainment history. Charlie could have made Tramp films for the rest of his career. Audiences would have paid to see them. Studios would have distributed them. He'd have remained the most bankable star in Hollywood. Instead, he chose to experiment, to try new things, to risk failure. The films after Modern Times are uneven. Some are brilliant, some are not. But they're all Charlie trying to find what came next. That's courage, not the courage of the Tramp facing down bullies. The courage of an artist who'd achieved everything and was willing to start over. The exile years in Switzerland saw Charlie trying to recapture that artistic ambition. He made A King in New York in 1957, a bitter satire about American McCarthyism and consumer culture. It was angry in a way his earlier films never were. The Tramp had been hopeful, even in despair. The character in A King in New York was just exhausted. The film flopped. European audiences didn't connect with its specifically American targets. American audiences couldn't see it. The film wasn't released in the United States until 1973. By then, it felt like a historical document. His final film, A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967, was even stranger. A romantic comedy starring Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren, directed by an aging Charlie who could no longer perform the physical comedy himself. He had to describe what he wanted and watch others attempt it. The film is beautiful in places and completely dead in others. Critics savaged it. Audiences ignored it. Charlie's last attempt at filmmaking ended in commercial and critical failure. He retreated to his estate in Switzerland and stopped trying. The final decade of Charlie's life was quiet. He lived with Una and their children in a large house overlooking Lake Geneva. He received visitors, watched films, spent time with his family. Occasionally, he'd talk about new projects, but nothing came of them. The creative drive that had powered him for 6 decades was finally exhausted. In 1975, Queen Elizabeth knighted him. Sir Charles Chaplin, the poor kid from Kennington who'd left England as a music hall performer, returned as royalty, sort of. He was too frail to kneel, so the Queen came to him. The ceremony was brief. Charlie was 85 years old and barely present. The recognition meant something, but it came too late to change anything. On Christmas morning, 1977, Charlie woke early as he always did. He got dressed, had breakfast with Una, and returned to his room to rest. Sometime that morning, he suffered a stroke. Una found him unresponsive. He died shortly after, surrounded by family. He was 88 years old. The funeral was small and private. Charlie had requested no public ceremony, no elaborate memorial. He was buried in a cemetery near his home. The grave marker was simple, just his name and dates, nothing about his films or his fame. A few months later, something bizarre happened. 2 men dug up Charlie's coffin and stole his body. They demanded ransom from Una, threatening to destroy the remains if she didn't pay. The Swiss police eventually caught them. Charlie's body was recovered and reburied in a theft-proof vault. Even in death, he couldn't escape being treated as property. But the real story isn't how he died. It's what he left behind. Go to almost any country on Earth and show people a photo of the Tramp. They'll recognize him. Not Charlie Chaplin necessarily. Many won't know the actor's name. But they'll know the character. The bowler hat, the cane, the moustache, the waddle. It's entered human consciousness in a way that transcends film history. Why? Why does this particular image endure when so many others from that era are forgotten? I think it's because Charlie captured something essential about human experience. Not just poverty or struggle, though those are part of it. He captured the feeling of being out of place in the world, of trying to maintain dignity when circumstances make that almost impossible, of persisting despite knowing you'll probably fail. That's not specific to the Depression or to early 20th century capitalism. That's just being human. Every generation faces different specifics, but the underlying experience remains. The world is often hostile. Success is often arbitrary. Kindness is often punished while cruelty succeeds. And yet we continue. We get up. We try again. We help each other when we can. The Tramp embodied that persistence without making it sentimental. He wasn't noble. He was selfish sometimes, cowardly sometimes, foolish often, but he kept going. And when he walked down that final road at the end of modern times, he was still walking. That image, more than any other, is Charlie's legacy. Not the films themselves, though they matter. Not the innovations in filmmaking, though those changed cinema forever. The image of an ordinary person, beaten down by life, choosing to continue, choosing to help, choosing to hope. It's an image that can't be copyrighted or controlled or owned. It belongs to everyone now, which is fitting. Charlie spent his career showing that the people the world dismissed, the poor and the homeless and the struggling, had as much humanity as anyone else. Maybe more, because they had to work harder to maintain it. The Tramp proved that. And now the Tramp belongs to all of us. The factory worker in modern times, arms jerking uncontrollably after hours tightening bolts. The flower girl in City Lights, Bailey, heaving the Tramp is a millionaire because she can't see him. The kid learning to survive on the streets of a city that doesn't care. These images stick because they're true, not factually true, but emotionally true. Charlie knew poverty. He knew hunger. He knew what it felt like to be invisible to people who had power. He knew the strange dignity of surviving despite everything, and he put that knowledge on screen in a way that didn't require language or explanation. You just watched and understood. That's art, not craft, though Charlie was a master craftsman. Not entertainment, though his films are still entertaining. Art, taking human experience and transforming it into something that reveals truths we might not have been able to articulate otherwise. Charlie did that. A poor English kid with no formal education, who learned to perform in music halls and worked his way to Hollywood, created art that will outlast everything else from his era. The stars of his generation are forgotten. The studios that employed him are gone. The political systems he criticised have changed or collapsed, but the Tramp remains. Walking down endless roads, twirling his cane, tipping his hat to a world that barely notices him. Still here, still walking, still trying. The man who created that image lived until 1977. That's worth remembering. Charlie Chaplin wasn't some figure from ancient history. He lived through both world wars, the Cold War, the space race, Vietnam. He saw the Beatles and Watergate and Star Wars. The world changed completely, multiple times during his lifetime, and through it all people kept watching his films. New generations discovered the Tramp. That's rare. Most artists are products of their moment. Their work speaks to specific circumstances, specific anxieties, specific technologies. When those change, the work becomes historical artifact rather than living art. Charlie's films should have become artifacts. Silent cinema was dead by 1930. The depression that made modern times resonate past, the social conditions that created the Tramp's world, transformed beyond recognition. Yet the films didn't become museum pieces. They stayed alive. Why? Because Charlie understood something that most filmmakers missed. He understood that specificity creates universality. The more precisely you capture one particular experience, one particular truth, the more it resonates with everyone. The tramp isn't every man. He's one very specific person. But that specificity makes him universal. We don't see ourselves in generic characters. We see ourselves in particular ones. The more detailed and specific they are, the more we recognize our own experiences in them. Charlie made the tramp so particular, so precisely observed, that he became everyone. That's counterintuitive. Most people trying to create universal art go broad and vague. They create characters without specifics, situations without context, emotions without detail. They think that's how you reach everyone. It's not. You reach everyone by being so specific that people recognize the truth beneath the details. Charlie was a poor London kid. His films are about a poor American tramp. But poverty isn't the universal element. The universal element is the emotional truth of how poverty feels. The humiliation, the resourcefulness, the small victories that mean everything. Those transcend time and place. Someone watching city lights in 1931 Manhattan, and someone watching it in 2020 Mumbai, and someone watching it in 2075 Lagos, all understand the tramp. Not because they share his circumstances, but because they recognize the emotional reality he embodies. That's what makes great art great, not its circumstances, but its truths. Charlie also understood timing in a way that went beyond comedy. He understood when to hold a shot, when to cut, when to let silence work, when to add music. Modern Times has sequences that run for minutes without cuts. The factory sequence, the feeding machine, the department store at night. These are long takes by any standard, but they never feel slow. They feel precisely as long as they need to be. That's mastery. Most filmmakers either cut too fast, afraid of boring the audience, or too slow, indulging their own vision. Charlie cut when the moment was complete, not before, not after, exactly when. You can feel that precision. Even now, even in films nearly a century old, you feel the rhythm. It's like music. Each shot has its proper length, its proper weight. The composition between shots creates meaning. The timing creates emotion. And it all feels inevitable, as if it couldn't have been any other way. But it could have. Charlie tried dozens of takes for every shot. He rehearsed endlessly. He built elaborate sets just to get one gag right. The precision wasn't accidental. It was the result of obsessive work, of understanding that comedy especially depends on exact timing. One frame too early and the joke doesn't land. One frame too late and the moment dies. Charlie found the exact frame. Every time. That's why his films still work. The technology is ancient. The world they depict is gone. But the timing is perfect, and perfect timing is permanent. Comedy relies on surprise. You set up an expectation, then violate it in a specific way. If the violation comes too early, there's no expectation to violate. If it comes too late, the expectation has faded. It has to come at the exact moment when the tension between expectation and reality creates the maximum effect. Charlie understood this instinctively. His gags build perfectly. The setup, the complication, the payoff, each element arrives at the precise moment it should. Watch the bread roll dance in The Gold Rush. He picks up two forks, stabs them into two rolls, and makes them dance. It's a simple idea, but the execution is perfect. The timing of each movement, the expression on his face, the way the camera holds on the moment just long enough before cutting away. Everything is exact. That sequence has been copied countless times. It's been parodied and referenced and imitated, but the copies never have the same effect because they don't have Charlie's timing. They don't understand that the joke isn't the dancing rolls. The joke is the emotional journey of watching someone create beauty out of poverty. The rolls represent the meal he can't afford. The dance represents the life he wants to live. The juxtaposition creates meaning that transcends the gag itself. That's why it endures. It's not just funny, it's true. Charlie understood that comedy and tragedy are the same thing viewed from different angles. The Tramp struggles are funny because we're watching from outside. As if we were living them, they'd be tragic. Charlie knew this. He walked the line between laughter and tears constantly. Sometimes he'd push you over into one, then pull you back into the other. City Lights does this brilliantly. The flower girl mistakes the Tramp for a millionaire. It's funny, but it's also heartbreaking because we know the truth, and she doesn't. When she gets her sight back and realizes who he really is, the film doesn't tell us how to feel. Is it happy? Is it sad? It's both. It's everything. That final shot of the Tramp, smiling uncertainly while the flower girl looks at him, recognizing him but not quite believing it. We don't know what happens next. Charlie doesn't tell us. He just holds on that moment of uncertainty, of hope mixed with fear, and lets us feel it. That's confidence. Most filmmakers would explain. They'd add dialogue or music or another scene to clarify the emotion. Charlie just shows us two faces and trusts that we'll understand. We do, because he's built the entire film toward this moment, and when it arrives, it's exactly right. Nothing more is needed. Modern times end similarly. The Tramp and the girl walk down a road toward an uncertain future. They're poor. They're homeless. They have nothing. But they're together, and they're moving forward. The film doesn't promise they'll succeed. It doesn't even suggest things will get better. It just shows them continuing. That's not a happy ending in the conventional sense, but it's not tragic either. It's honest. Life continues. We continue. We face each day knowing we might fail, but we try anyway. That's the human condition. Charlie didn't need to explain it. He just showed two people walking down a road. The image is enough. This restraint, this trust in the image itself, is almost alien to modern filmmaking. We're trained to explain everything, to make sure the audience gets it, to underline every emotion and clarify every ambiguity. Charlie did the opposite. He gave us the essential image and let it resonate. That takes courage. It also takes craft. You can only trust the image if the image is perfect, if the composition is right, if the performance is right, if the context has been properly established. Charlie ensured all of that through endless work, but once it was right, he stopped. He didn't add, he didn't explain. He trusted that the work he'd done would carry the moment. It did. It still does. Those final images, the Tramp walking away into uncertain futures, have become iconic. Everyone knows them, even if they've never seen the films. They've entered the collective unconscious. They represent something about human persistence that can't be put into words but everyone recognizes. That's the ultimate achievement for any artist, to create an image so powerful that it becomes part of how we understand ourselves. Charlie did that multiple times. The Tramp himself is such an image. You can describe him, list his characteristics, explain his origins, but none of that captures what he represents. He's just there in our collective imagination, representing something we all understand but can't quite articulate. Maybe that's why Charlie himself eventually left him behind. After Modern Times, he stopped playing the character. His next film, The Great Dictator, featured a character who resembled the Tramp but wasn't him. Then Monsieur Verdoux, where he played a completely different person. Then Limelight, then A King in New York. All different characters. Charlie moved on. But the world didn't. The Tramp remained the definitive image. Everything else Charlie did was measured against that character. His later films were critically admired, but never reached the same cultural saturation. It's as if Charlie created something so powerful that it consumed his own ability to create anything else that would resonate as deeply. That's a strange fate for an artist, to be defined forever by work you did in the first half of your career, to know that nothing you create later will ever achieve the same impact. Many artists face this. They have their moment of perfect alignment between their vision and the culture's needs. Then the culture moves on, or they move on, and the alignment is lost. Charlie's alignment happened early. By the time he was 40, he'd created the work that would define him forever. He had 40 more years of life. He made films during those years, good films, but they were footnotes to the Tramp. Did that bother him? We don't know. He didn't say much about it publicly, but he must have felt it. The knowledge that his greatest achievement was behind him, that he'd peaked before middle age, that everything else would be compared to something he could never recreate. The Tramp belonged to a specific moment in cinema history, silent film, before sound complicated everything. Once sound arrived, the Tramp couldn't exist in the same way. He'd need to talk, and if he talked, he'd become specific in ways that would destroy the universality. So Charlie set him aside. He made Modern Times as a last hurrah, a last chance to play the character he'd created. Then he moved on. The world eventually moved on too. Sound became standard. Colour became standard. Cinematic language evolved. The techniques Charlie pioneered became basic grammar. His innovations were absorbed and superseded. The films themselves began to look old-fashioned. By the 1960s, they were historical artifacts. Important, yes. Influential, absolutely. But not contemporary, not relevant to young filmmakers trying to push cinema forward. Charlie became a figure of history. An old man in Switzerland, remembered but not particularly celebrated. The culture had left him behind. Then something strange happened. The films came back. New audiences discovered them. Film students studied them. Critics reassessed them. The cultural moment had shifted again, and suddenly Charlie's work felt relevant once more. This happened gradually through the 60s and 70s. Cinematheques began showing his films. Revival houses programmed them. Universities taught them. A new generation encountered the Tramp without the baggage of having lived through his original popularity. They saw the films fresh, judged them on their own merits, and found them astonishing. The physical comedy still worked. The emotional beats still landed. The social commentary still resonated. Poverty hadn't disappeared. Industrial dehumanization hadn't disappeared. The struggles of ordinary people against systems too large to fight remained relevant. The Tramp's experiences in Modern Times spoke to factory workers in the 70s just as clearly as they'd spoken to factory workers in the 30s. Critics began writing serious analytical pieces about Charlie's technique. They examined his use of space, his understanding of visual rhythm, his ability to construct elaborate gags that paid off perfectly. Academic film theory was developing, and Charlie's work provided rich material for analysis. But it wasn't just academics. Regular audiences responded too. The films played to packed houses. People laughed at the same gags that had made their grandparents laugh. The universality that Charlie had aimed for proved genuinely universal across time. This rediscovery came too late for Charlie to fully enjoy it professionally. He was in his 80s by then, living in Switzerland, no longer making films, but he knew it was happening. He received letters. He read the articles. He understood that his work had survived the transition from contemporary entertainment to classic art. That's a rare trajectory. Most popular entertainment disappears within a generation. The jokes stop landing. The references become obscure. The style feels dated. Future audiences have to work to understand what people originally saw in it. Charlie's work avoided that fate. The films remained accessible. You could show City Lights to someone who'd never heard of Charlie Chaplin, and they'd understand it immediately. No historical context required. No explanation needed. The story worked, the emotions worked, the comedy worked. Why? Part of it is the silence. Silent films force you to pay attention differently. You watch faces, bodies, movements. You read emotions visually. That's a skill we still possess, even in an age of dialogue-heavy entertainment. The silence makes the films feel almost contemporary, as if they exist outside normal film history. Part of it is Charlie's performance. The Tramp is such a clear, vivid character that he transcends his era. He's not a 20s character or a 30s character. He's just a character, period. His struggles are human struggles, not historical struggles. and part of it is craft. Charlie constructed his films with such precision that they function like machines. Every element serves the whole. Nothing is wasted. The pacing is exact. The payoffs are earned. This level of craft doesn't age because it's not dependent on fashion or trends. It's fundamental filmmaking excellence. The rediscovery culminated in 1972 when Charlie returned to America for the first time in 20 years. He'd been effectively exiled since the early 50s, his re-entry permit revoked while he was travelling. The accusation was communist sympathies. The reality was that J. Edgar Hoover's FBI had been surveilling him for years and found his politics objectionable. Charlie never fought the exile legally. He could have. He had resources, lawyers, support, but he chose to stay away. He settled in Switzerland with Una and their children, made his last few films there, and accepted that America had rejected him. Then in 1972, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences invited him back to receive an honorary Oscar. It was a gesture of reconciliation. The political climate had changed. The blacklist era was acknowledged as shameful. Charlie's contributions to cinema were undeniable. The Academy wanted to honour him before he died. Charlie accepted. He was 83, frail, using a cane. Una accompanied him. They flew to Los Angeles in April. The Oscar ceremony that year included a compilation of clips from Charlie's films. The audience, filled with industry professionals who'd grown up watching him, gave him the longest standing ovation in Academy Awards history. 12 minutes. People wept openly. Charlie himself wept. He didn't give a speech. He was too emotional. He simply accepted the statuette, waved to the crowd, and left the stage. The moment captured something larger than one man receiving an award. It was an entire industry acknowledging its debt to someone who'd helped create the medium they all worked in. That trip was Charlie's last public appearance. He returned to Switzerland and lived quietly for another 5 years. His health declined slowly. The brilliant physical control that had defined his career was gone. He needed help with basic tasks. His mind remained sharp, but his body had finally given out. On Christmas Day, 1977, Charlie Chaplin died in his sleep at his home in Vevey. He was 88 years old. The news spread globally within hours. Obituaries appeared in every major newspaper. Television networks interrupted programming to announce his death. World leaders issued statements. The response was overwhelming. But here's what's strange. Despite the global mourning, despite the recognition of his importance, Charlie's death didn't feel like the end of an era, because the era had already ended decades earlier. The world Charlie belonged to, the world of silent film and vaudeville and music hall comedy, had disappeared long before he did. He'd outlived his own relevance by 40 years. He'd watched cinema evolve past him, watched new filmmakers use techniques he'd pioneered without knowing where they came from, watched audiences forget and then rediscover his work. He'd been simultaneously celebrated as a historical figure and ignored as a contemporary artist. That's a complicated legacy to leave behind. On one hand, his influence is everywhere. Every physical comedian who came after him learned from him. Every filmmaker who uses visual storytelling learned from him. Every artist who tries to balance comedy and pathos is working in territory he mapped. On the other hand, his specific contribution can feel invisible because it's been so thoroughly absorbed. The innovations that made him revolutionary became standard practice. The emotional register he created became the default mode for a certain kind of filmmaking. He succeeded so completely that his success erased itself. Modern audiences watching City Lights don't think, this is revolutionary filmmaking. They think, this is a good movie. The revolutionary aspect is invisible because it's now normal. That's the paradox of being truly influential. You change things so fundamentally that people forget there was ever another way. Charlie understood this, probably. He'd lived through enough cultural shifts to recognize how quickly the present becomes the past. He'd seen his own techniques go from cutting edge to standard, to old-fashioned to classic. He'd experienced the full cycle. What he might not have understood is how completely his image would dominate his legacy. Not Charlie Chaplin the filmmaker, not Charlie Chaplin the businessman or the political figure or the complicated human being. The tramp. That's what survived most powerfully. The little man with the cane and the bowler hat and the too-tight jacket. The character Charlie created in his 20s and played for 2 decades. That image became larger than the person who created it. It became larger than the films it appeared in. It became an icon in the truest sense. Icons don't age. They exist outside time. The tramp doesn't belong to the 20s or 30s. He belongs to the permanent collection of human imagery. Like Hamlet or Don Quixote or Mickey Mouse. These figures transcend their origins and become part of how we understand ourselves. That's what Charlie achieved, not through careful planning or strategic career management, through intuition, craft, and relentless work. He created something that resonated so deeply with so many people that it became permanent. But permanence comes with costs. The icon overshadowed the person. The tramp overshadowed Charlie. Everything else he did, all his other films, all his other characters, all his other achievements, existed in the shadow of that one creation. Was that fair? Probably not. Charlie's later films deserve more attention than they get. His business acumen deserves recognition. His survival through decades of industry changes deserves respect. But culture doesn't distribute attention fairly. It latches onto certain images and holds them forever while letting other things fade. Charlie got immortality, but only for part of his work. The rest became footnotes. That's the bargain fame offers. You can live forever, but only the version of you that captured the culture's imagination. Everything else disappears. Did he accept that bargain willingly? We can't know. He never stopped working, never stopped trying new things, never seemed content to simply rest on his early achievements. That suggests he wanted more than to be remembered for the tramp. He wanted to be remembered as an artist who grew, changed, pushed himself into new territory. But the culture made its choice. The tramp was what it wanted from him. The tramp was what it kept. Everything else was appreciated by some, ignored by most, and gradually forgotten by nearly everyone. This is the reality for artists who create something genuinely iconic. The icon takes on its own life. It stops being something they control and becomes something the culture owns. Mickey Mouse doesn't belong to Disney anymore. Not really. He belongs to everyone who's ever seen him. Same with Superman. Same with Sherlock Holmes. Same with the tramp. These figures escape their creators and become public property in a way that transcends copyright or legal ownership. They exist in collective consciousness as shared references, shared understanding, shared cultural vocabulary. Charlie created one of those figures, then spent the rest of his life dealing with the consequences. The figure opened doors for him. It made him wealthy and famous and powerful, but it also trapped him. He couldn't escape it. He couldn't create anything else that would resonate powerfully. He was the tramp's creator, and that defined him forever. Artists dream of creating something that lasts, something that survives beyond their own lifetime, something that becomes part of the permanent cultural landscape. Charlie achieved that dream so completely that it consumed everything else. The tramp will exist as long as cinema exists. As long as people watch films, they'll watch City Lights and Modern Times and The Gold Rush. The character will remain vivid and immediate and meaningful. That's the achievement Charlie wanted, but it came with a price. The man disappeared behind the character. The complicated, difficult, brilliant, flawed human being named Charlie Chaplin became a footnote to his own creation. We remember the icon. We forget the person. Maybe that's acceptable. Maybe that's even preferable. Icons serve a purpose that individual humans can't. They represent ideas, emotions, experiences that transcend any single person. The Tramp represents something about human resilience and dignity that's more important than Charlie's personal biography. Still, there's something sad about it. A man lives 88 years. He creates dozens of films. He builds businesses, raises children, navigates political turmoil, survives personal tragedies, experiences the full complexity of human existence. And all of that collapses into one image, one character, one icon. That's Charlie's legacy. Not the full complexity of his life, but the simplicity of the Tramp. The little man who won't give up, who faces every hardship with dignity, who remains human despite everything the world throws at him. That image endures. It will endure long after everyone who knew Charlie personally is gone. Long after the last person who saw his films in theatres has died. The icon survives everything. And Charlie, wherever he is, probably understands that this was always how it would end. He died on Christmas morning, 1977. That detail seems too perfect to be real, but it is. Charlie Chaplin, who built his career on sentiment and carefully orchestrated emotion, left the world on the day most associated with warmth and a family and human connection. He was 88 years old. He'd been living in Switzerland for 25 years at that point, exiled from America by his own choice after the country made clear he wasn't welcome. The final years were quiet. He wasn't making films anymore. His health had deteriorated. The man who'd spent decades in constant physical motion, whose body had been his primary instrument, was now confined to a wheelchair. His movements limited, his energy diminished. But he was surrounded by family. Una was there, 8 of his children were there. The house in Vevey, overlooking Lake Geneva, was full of people who loved him. That's something. After all the chaos and controversy and public judgment, he ended his life in a place of peace with people who chose to be there. The obituaries were massive. Every major newspaper in the world ran lengthy pieces about his death. They recounted his career, his achievements, his controversies. They called him a genius. They called him complicated. They acknowledged his flaws while celebrating his contributions to cinema. The tributes poured in from fellow filmmakers, from actors, from writers, from critics. Everyone had something to say about what Charlie meant to the art form. The funeral was small and private, exactly as he wanted. No public spectacle, no grand ceremony, just family and close friends gathering to say goodbye. He was buried in the Coursier-sur-Vevey cemetery, a modest plot in a quiet Swiss village. The headstone was simple. His name, his dates, nothing more. For a man who'd spent his life performing for millions, the ending was remarkably understated. But death wasn't quite the end of Charlie's story. 3 months after the burial, 2 men broke into the cemetery in the middle of the night, dug up his coffin, and stole his body. This actually happened. It sounds like a bizarre joke, something too absurd to be true. But in March 1978, Charlie's corpse was missing, and the family received ransom demands. The grave robbers wanted money. They thought they could extort the Chaplin family by holding Charlie's remains hostage. They were wrong. Una refused to pay. She told the police she was certain Charlie would have found the whole situation ridiculous. The authorities eventually caught the men, 2 unemployed mechanics who'd hatched this scheme out of desperation. They'd hidden the coffin in a cornfield. The body was recovered, reburied, and this time the grave was reinforced with concrete to prevent any future attempts. Even in death, Charlie couldn't escape absurdity. The man who'd built his career on ridiculous situations, on the collision between dignity and chaos, became the subject of one final darkly comic episode. It's almost fitting. His legacy after death followed a predictable pattern. The initial wave of tributes gave way to reassessment. Critics began examining his work with fresh eyes. Some of the films that had been dismissed or overlooked during his lifetime gained new appreciation. Academics started writing serious studies of his technique, his themes, his influence on cinema. The Tramp became a subject of scholarly analysis, dissected and interpreted and theorized about. Film schools taught his work as foundational texts. Students who'd never heard of Charlie Chaplin before college were suddenly required to watch City Lights and Modern Times and write papers about visual storytelling and physical comedy and the economics of the Depression era. The films entered the canon, that vague but powerful category of works that are considered essential, important, worthy of preservation and study. Museums held retrospectives. Archives restored his films, bringing them back to pristine condition. The grainy, scratched prints that had circulated for decades were replaced by clean, sharp versions that let audiences see the work as it was originally intended. New generations discovered him. Kids who grew up with television, and then video games, and then streaming services eventually encountered this strange little man from the silent era who communicated entirely through movement. Some of them connected with it immediately. Others found it boring, slow, incomprehensible. The culture had moved so far from Charlie's era that his work required translation, context, explanation, but he never completely disappeared. The Tramp remained recognizable even as the world changed. That silhouette, the cane, the walk, the little mustache, people who'd never seen a Chaplin film could still identify the character. That's the power of true iconography. It transcends its original context and becomes something permanent. Meanwhile, the controversies faded, not because they were resolved or explained or justified, but because time has a way of smoothing rough edges. The political accusations from the McCarthy era looked increasingly absurd as the Cold War ended and the panic about communism dissipated. The personal scandals became historical footnotes, interesting details in biographies, but no longer sources of active outrage. The culture decided to remember the art and let the rest recede into background noise. This wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was more like collective amnesia. The things that had seemed so urgent and important during Charlie's lifetime lost their charge. New scandals replaced old ones. New controversies demanded attention. The world moved on, and Charlie's specific sins became less relevant. What remained was the work. The films still existed, they still played, they still made people laugh and cry. That became his defense, his justification, his redemption. Whatever else he'd done, whatever mistakes he'd made, whatever damage he'd caused, the work survived. And the work was good. So good that it justified keeping his name alive, keeping his films in circulation, keeping the Tramp walking through the cultural landscape, decade after decade. But here's the question that haunts everything. Did the work excuse the life? Should it? This is the debate that circles around every complicated artist. We want to separate the art from the artist, to enjoy the creation without endorsing the creator. But that separation isn't always clean. The work and the life are connected. Charlie's films came from his experiences, his obsessions, his psychology. The Tramp's resilience reflected Charlie's own survival instinct. The romantic idealization of young women in his films reflected his personal fixations. The sentimentality and the cynicism both came from the same source. You can't completely extract one from the other. Some people argue that great art transcends the personal failings of its creator, that beauty and meaning exist independently of the moral character of the person who made them, that we can appreciate City Lights without approving of Charlie's romantic choices, that the gift to humanity outweighs the private sins. Others argue that's a convenient excuse, that celebrating the work means celebrating the person, whether we admit it or not, that giving Charlie's films prestigious positions in the canon means giving him prestigious positions in history, that we're actively choosing to honor someone who did things we'd condemn in anyone else. There's no clean answer. The debate continues. Every generation has to decide for itself how to handle these contradictions. How much weight to give the art versus the life. How to acknowledge both the genius and the damage. Charlie's case is neither the worst nor the simplest. He's somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, complicated in ways that resist easy judgment. What's certain is that he changed cinema. That's not debatable. The techniques he developed, the standards he set, the possibilities he demonstrated, those things permanently altered the medium. Directors who came after him were responding to his work whether they knew it or not. The language of film includes vocabulary that Charlie invented, but he also harmed people. That's not debatable either. The pattern of relationships with teenage girls wasn't a misunderstanding or a cultural difference. It was a choice he made repeatedly, using his power and fame to pursue people who couldn't resist him. The political controversies might have been overblown, but his handling of them was often arrogant and dismissive. The business decisions that hurt partners and collaborators came from prioritizing his own interests above everything else. Both things are true: the genius and the damage, the achievement and the failure, the icon and the man. History will keep both. The culture has decided that Charlie matters enough to remember, which means remembering all of it. The films will continue playing as long as cinema exists. Students will study his technique. Critics will write about his influence. The Tramp will walk through the imagination of future generations who have no connection to the W. Old Charlie came from, but the biographical details will remain available too. The controversies will stay in the record. The pattern of behaviour will be documented. Anyone who wants to know the full story will be able to find it. That's probably the right balance. Not erasing either the achievement or the complications, but holding both in tension, acknowledging that humans are capable of creating beauty while also causing harm. That genius doesn't excuse damage, that we can appreciate what someone built while also recognizing what they destroyed. Charlie understood performance better than almost anyone. He knew how to construct an image, how to present a version of himself to the world. The Tramp was the ultimate performance, a character so carefully crafted that it became more real than the person behind it. But life isn't a performance you can control completely. The truth seeps through eventually. The private person emerges despite all efforts to manage the public image. Charlie spent his career trying to show audiences what he wanted them to see. But history sees everything. The full picture emerges over time. The icon and the man exist together now, inseparable. When we watch City Lights, we're watching both. The brilliant filmmaker who understood emotion and timing and visual storytelling better than almost anyone. And the complicated man who made choices that hurt people, who used his power irresponsibly, who failed to live up to the ideals his films promoted. Maybe that's appropriate. Maybe that's honest. The Tramp represented an ideal of human dignity and resilience. Charlie represented the messy reality of human failure and contradiction. Both are real. Both matter. The work endures because it captured something true about the human experience. The complications endure because they're also true about the human experience. We're all contradictions. We're all capable of creating beauty and causing harm. We're all trying to be better than we are, while frequently failing. Charlie just did it on a larger scale, in a more public way, with higher stakes and bigger consequences. His story isn't a morality tale with a clear lesson. It's just a life, as complicated and contradictory as any life, played out in front of millions. The Tramp will outlive all of us. That character will exist as long as people watch films. The little man with the cane and the waddle and the determination to maintain dignity despite everything. That image is permanent. Charlie Chaplin, the person, will fade. Already he's becoming historical, distant, someone we read about rather than someone we feel we know. The living memory of him is disappearing as the last people who saw his films in theatres, who followed his career in real time, pass away. Soon he'll be entirely historical, a figure from another era that requires explanation and context. But the Tramp will remain immediate. That's the strange magic of cinema. The performance captured on film stays alive in a way the performer can't. Charlie's body is buried in Switzerland, reinforced with concrete to keep it there, but the tramp is still walking, still falling, still getting back up, still making people laugh and cry, still representing something essential about human resilience and dignity and the refusal to be defeated. That was Charlie's gift to the world, a character that transcends time, that speaks to something universal in the human experience. The cost of creating that gift was high, for Charlie himself, for the people around him, for the complexity and contradiction that got buried under the icon. But the gift remains. That's what we're left with. Not the simple story of a genius, not the simple story of a villain, the complicated story of a human being who created something that outlived him, something that matters, something that will keep mattering. The tramp walks on, and Charlie Chaplin, wherever he is, watches from a distance. The creator and the creation, forever linked, forever separate, one immortal, one gone. That's how it ends. The little man walks into the fog at the edge of the frame. He's done this 100 times before, in a dozen different films, always moving forward, always alone, or nearly alone, always uncertain what comes next. That image, repeated with variations across decades, became the signature. Not a happy ending, not a sad ending, just continuation. The road goes on, the tramp goes with it. That's where we leave him. But Charlie Chaplin stopped walking a long time ago. The man who created the character died in Switzerland on Christmas morning, 1977, surrounded by family, far from the London slums where he started and the Hollywood studios where he built his empire. He was 88 years old. He'd outlived his era by decades, watched the art form he'd helped create evolve past him, seen his techniques become so standard that nobody remembered they'd once been revolutionary. The funeral was quiet, the burial was simple. Then grave robbers stole his body for ransom, which somehow feels appropriate. Even in death, Charlie couldn't escape absurdity. The coffin was recovered from a cornfield, reburied in concrete, and finally left to rest. The man was gone, but the image persists. Walk into any city in the world and show someone a picture of the tramp. They'll know him. Maybe not the actor's name, maybe not the film's, but the silhouette, the cane, the walk, the tiny moustache. That's universal recognition. That's permanence. Charlie achieved what every artist dreams of, and what almost none accomplish. He created something that transcends its moment, that speaks across generations. That becomes part of how humans understand themselves. The cost was everything else. His later films exist in the shadow of his early work. His complicated personal life gets footnoted. His political struggles become historical curiosities. The full complexity of 88 years collapses into one image, one character, one icon. That's the bargain. Immortality, but only for the part of you that captured the culture's imagination. Everything else fades. Was it worth it? We can't answer that. Charlie's not here to ask, but the tramp remains, still walking, still falling, still maintaining dignity, despite circumstances designed to crush it. That character still means something, still speaks to people who've never experienced Depression-era poverty, who live in a world Charlie couldn't have imagined, who face different struggles but recognize the same essential challenge. How do you keep going when the world seems designed to break you? How do you maintain humanity when everything strips it away? The tramp answered those questions without words, just through movement and expression and the stubborn refusal to stay down. That's the legacy. Not the scandals or the politics or the business empire or the complicated relationships. Just a figure walking down a road, cane twirling, shoulders rolling, heading towards something uncertain, but moving forward anyway. That image contains more truth about human experience than most philosophical treatises. Charlie understood something fundamental. He translated it into movement, and the translation survived. Cinema has changed completely, since Charlie's era. Sound arrived, then colour, then digital, then streaming, then whatever comes next. The technology transforms constantly. The business models shift. The audience's attention spans allegedly shrink. But the Tramp still works. You can show city lights to someone who's never seen a silent film, and they'll understand it immediately. The language Charlie developed remains legible. That's the test of genuine art. Not whether critics praise it or academics study it, but whether it continues speaking to people who have no obligation to care. The films will outlast everyone reading these words. They'll outlast the streaming services that currently host them. They'll outlast the current conception of what cinema is and what it's for. As long as people watch moving images and care about stories, they'll watch Charlie's films. Not because they're historically important, though they are. Because they work. The comedy lands, the emotion resonates, the character lives. Charlie Chaplin was born in a slum in 1889. He died in a mansion in 1977. The distance between those 2 points is almost incomprehensible. He transformed himself completely, multiple times, always moving forward, always building something new. The boy who learned to perform because it was the only way to survive became the man who revolutionized an art form. The impoverished child became the world's most famous entertainer. The exile from England became the exile from America, became the honored guest returned for one final standing ovation. But the story that matters most isn't the rags to riches narrative. It's what he created while making that journey. The films, yes. The techniques and innovations, certainly. But more than that, the Tramp himself. That strange little figure who shouldn't work, whose costume is a collection of contradictions, whose entire existence is precarious and absurd, but who maintains dignity anyway, who falls and gets back up, who loves without hope of return, who faces the world's cruelty with resilience and occasional grace. That character is Charlie's real achievement. Not the wealth or fame or influence, though he had all of that. The character, the image, the idea made visible. That's what survives. That's what matters. The Tramp walks on, and the rest is history.